I became obsessed with hidden rooms when I was 13. It started with an article about a family in Vermont who discovered a secret chamber behind their basement wall while renovating. The room contained belongings from the 1800s that hadn't been touched in years. Something about that discovery really excited me. The idea that history could be hiding just inches away behind drywall. For 3 years, I collected stories about similar findings. Hidden priest holes in Old English manors. Prohibition-era speakeasies concealed behind bookshelf doors. Forgotten fallout shelters beneath suburban homes. Each discovery convinced me that our ordinary world had many secrets. Our house became my obsession. Built in the 1930s, it had weathered several renovations before my parents bought it. The floor plan never quite made sense to me. The measurements didn't add up, especially on the second floor between Lisa's bedroom and the hallway bathroom. There had to be roughly 3 feet of unaccounted space. "John, not every house is perfectly square," Mom had explained when I first brought it up at dinner 2 years ago. "There's probably just extra insulation or ductwork in that wall." Dad nodded in agreement. "Houses this old have quirks. It doesn't mean there's a secret passageway." But I'd done the calculations. I'd measured every room, every hallway. The numbers didn't lie. There was a void behind Lisa's wall, and nobody seemed to care except me. "You need to get some actual hobbies," Lisa told me after I'd spent an entire Saturday tapping on her bedroom wall, listening for hollow spots. "Normal 16-year-old stuff, like video games or dating." I ignored her. I couldn't stop thinking about the wall. When Mom and Dad announced they'd be away for a weekend conference in Chicago, I knew my chance had finally arrived. They left Friday morning with the usual instructions about homework, emergency contacts, and absolutely no parties. They never said anything about not cutting into the walls. I waited until Lisa left for soccer practice that afternoon before retrieving Dad's toolbox from the garage. The reciprocating saw would be too noisy and destructive. Instead, I selected a utility knife, a pry bar, and a small handsaw. Simple tools for careful work. In Lisa's room, I ran my hand over the suspicious wall one more time. I'd already identified the stud pattern and marked a section between studs with small pencil dots. This would be my entry point. I took a deep breath and pressed the utility knife into the wall, dragging it in a careful square. The blade sliced through the paint and drywall with satisfying ease. 4 hours later, my arms ached and sweat dampened my t-shirt, but I'd managed to cut through the drywall and expose the wooden lath behind it. The demolition was messy despite my efforts to contain it. White dust covered Lisa's bed and dresser, and scraps of drywall littered her carpet. I kept going, sawing through the wooden lath piece by piece. The work was harder than I'd anticipated, and daylight had faded by the time I heard Lisa's key in the front door. I froze, saw in hand. Her footsteps on the stairs were followed by her voice. "John, did you order pizza yet? I'm starved." She appeared in the doorway and stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. Me kneeling on her floor, surrounded by destruction, a ragged hole in her wall. "What the hell are you doing?" She dropped her sports bag and rushed forward. "Mom and Dad are going to kill you." I held up my hands. "I know how this looks. It looks like you destroyed my wall. I can fix it before they get back, but listen, I was right." I pointed to the gap I'd created. "There's something back there." Lisa crossed her arms, her anger briefly eclipsed by skepticism. "Probably just mice and insulation. See for yourself." She hesitated, then curiosity won out. She knelt beside me and peered through the small hole I'd made. I grabbed my flashlight from the floor and clicked it on, aiming the beam into the darkness. "I don't see anything except—" She stopped abruptly. "Wait, that's not just the inside of a wall." I nodded, triumphant. "There's space, a lot of it." The gap was still too small to see much, but the flashlight beam revealed emptiness extending farther than a normal wall cavity should. I resumed my work with renewed energy, cutting and pulling away sections of lath and plaster while Lisa watched, her anger gradually transforming into reluctant interest. You know they'll ground you until college if they find out, she said, but started helping by clearing away debris. Only if they find out, I replied. We'll patch it up on Sunday. As the hole expanded, musty air came rushing out, bringing the smell of abandonment, dust, old paper, forgotten things. I breathed in deeply, happy to have proof of my theory. Lisa nodded, wrinkling her nose. It smells like Grandma's attic. By evening, I'd created an opening large enough for a person to squeeze through. We sat on the edge of Lisa's bed, staring at the dark hole in the wall. My flashlight beam revealed the beginning of a narrow passageway extending into darkness. The floor of the passage appeared to be wooden planks, covered in a thick layer of undisturbed dust. I can't believe you were actually right, Lisa said quietly. 3 years of research, I replied, unable to keep the pride from my voice. Dad said I was wasting my time. Lisa peered into the darkness. So, what now? We're not actually going in there, are we? Of course we are. This is the discovery of a lifetime. What if it's dangerous? That space has been sealed up for who knows how long, maybe for good reason. I was already gathering supplies, my phone, flashlight, a water bottle, and a small digital camera. If it was something dangerous, don't you think we'd know about it? This house has been standing for almost a century. Still, Lisa said, it feels wrong somehow, like we're trespassing. It's our house, not that part of it. I paused, looking at her. Her usual confidence had diminished, replaced by genuine concern. Listen, I'll go first. If it seems unsafe, we'll come right back and seal it up, I promise. She considered this, then sighed. Fine, but I'm bringing my pepper spray. You think there's a burglar who's been hiding in our walls for decades. Very funny. It just makes me feel better. I approached the opening, excitement buzzing through me. This was the moment I'd been working toward for years. Validation. Discovery. I clicked on the flashlight and ducked down, pushing myself through the hole. The temperature dropped immediately, at least 10 degrees cooler than Lisa's room. The air smelled old and dusty. I straightened up in the narrow space, shining my light in both directions. The passageway stretched left and right, disappearing into darkness. Come on, I called back to Lisa, my voice sounding different in the enclosed space, flatter, without echo. Lisa squeezed through the opening, her expression a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. It's freezing in here, she whispered. Old spaces usually are, I replied, though the coldness felt strange, much colder than I expected. The silence was absolute. No creaking house sounds, no distant traffic noise, not even the quiet sound of electronics that's always in the background. Just complete stillness. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls of bare wooden planks. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, undisturbed for what must have been decades. The dust on the floor was thick enough that our footprints stood out sharply, the first marks to be made here in a very long time. Which way? Lisa asked, staying close behind me. I considered both directions. Left would take us toward the bathroom, right toward the staircase. Right, I decided. Let's see where this goes. As we moved deeper into the passageway, the triumph I felt at proving my theory began mixing with something else, a growing unease I couldn't quite name. Every step took us further from the normal parts of our house into something unknown, something that had remained hidden despite generations of families living just inches away. The dust is so thick, Lisa observed, keeping her voice low as if afraid of disturbing something. Nobody has been here since... I don't even know. That's what makes it perfect, I replied, running my flashlight beam along the walls. A genuine discovery, completely untouched. But as we ventured deeper into the darkness, a small voice in the back of my mind wondered if there might have been good reasons why this space had been sealed away and forgotten. I pushed the thought aside. This was my moment of validation after years of research and speculation. Whatever lay ahead, I was determined to uncover it. Our footsteps echoed against the wooden planks beneath our feet, stirring up dust that had remained undisturbed for decades. I led the way, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness as Lisa followed close behind. "This goes farther than I expected," I whispered, my voice sounding flat in the confined space. "I don't like this," Lisa said, her breath visible in the cold air. "It feels like we're not supposed to be here." I ignored her concern. After 3 years of theories and calculations, I wasn't about to turn back now. The passage curved slightly, and then I saw it, a set of wooden stairs ascending steeply into darkness. "Look," I said, pointing my flashlight upward. "A staircase." Lisa peered around me. "Going where? We should be directly under the roof at this point." "Only one way to find out." The stairs creaked under our weight as we climbed. Each step seemed ready to give way, forcing us to test our footing before committing. At the top, we found ourselves in what could only be described as a hidden attic space, much larger than the narrow passage that had led us here. "This is impossible," Lisa muttered. "The house plans don't show anything like this." My flashlight revealed a space filled with forgotten things. Dust-covered trunks and boxes lined the walls. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. The air felt musty and much colder than the rest of the house. "It had to be sealed off during one of the renovations," I said, moving toward the nearest trunk. "Think about it. An entire section of the house hidden away for who knows how long." I knelt beside a large trunk and brushed away decades of dust. The brass latches were tarnished but unlocked. I lifted the heavy lid, revealing stacks of yellowed papers and photographs. "Check this out," I said, carefully lifting a black and white photograph. It showed a family standing in front of our house, but not our family. Strangers from another time, dressed in 1940s clothing, smiling stiffly at the camera. Lisa hovered over my shoulder, her breath warm against my ear. "Who are they?" "Previous owners, I guess." I set the photo aside and pulled out a stack of documents. "Look at these dates. 1943, 1944, building permits, renovation plans. Why would someone seal all this up inside a wall?" I continued sifting through the papers. According to these, they did major structural changes to the second floor. That must be when this space got closed off. Lisa wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "It's freezing in here. Can we go back now? We've solved your mystery." "Not yet." I moved deeper into the attic, sweeping my flashlight across the space. "There's more to see." At the far end of the attic, my light fell on something that made me stop. A door, solid wood with an antique brass keyhole. Unlike everything else in the space, it seemed well-maintained, almost new. "What's a door doing up here?" I approached it slowly. "It doesn't make sense with the layout of the house." Lisa joined me reluctantly. "It's probably just another storage space." I tried the handle. Locked. Damn. Lisa reached into her pocket and pulled out a pencil. "Let me try something." She inserted the pencil into the keyhole and wiggled it around. A metallic sound echoed from inside the lock. Something falling. Lisa withdrew the pencil and peered into the keyhole. "I think I just knocked the key out from the other side. It was in the lock." I pushed her gently aside and manipulated the mechanism with my fingers, feeling for any movement. After a minute of careful prodding, I was rewarded with a solid click. "Got it," I said, a surge of triumph rushing through me. We exchanged glances, both suddenly hesitant. Whatever lay beyond this door had been deliberately sealed away. "Open it," Lisa said finally. I turned the handle and pushed the door open, bracing myself for another dusty storage space. What we saw instead made no sense. I stood frozen, staring at a perfect replica of our downstairs hallway. The same cream-colored walls, the same hardwood floor, even the small family photos in identical frames. Everything exact down to the dent in the wall where I'd crashed my bike when I was 10. "What the hell?" Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. The hallway was illuminated by light fixtures that glowed with a soft, ambient light, despite the fact that no electricity could possibly reach this space. "This isn't possible," I said, though the evidence was right in front of us. I stepped forward cautiously, half expecting my foot to fall through what had to be an illusion. But the floor was solid beneath me. Real. The wood creaked exactly like our actual hallway. The air felt different here, thicker and strange. There was a scent I couldn't identify, something vaguely sweet but unnatural. "John, we need to go back," Lisa said, her voice tight and fearful. "This isn't right." But curiosity pulled me forward. "It's a perfect copy of our house, but that's impossible. Exactly why we should leave." I turned to look at her, standing rigid in the doorway. "Don't you want to know what else is here? How does this exist?" Lisa hesitated, then stepped into the hallway behind me, staying close enough that I could feel her trembling. "Just a quick look," she said. "Then we go back and seal this up again." I nodded, though I had no intention of leaving before I understood this impossible space. My flashlight beam seemed dimmer here, overwhelmed by the strange ambient light coming from the fixtures. "Let's check the rest of the house," I said, moving toward where our living room would be in the real world. "See how accurate this copy really is." Lisa followed me. "I don't understand how this got here. Who would build an exact replica of our house inside our actual house?" I had no answer. It defied all logic, all physics. But as we prepared to explore further, I couldn't help feeling that we'd discovered something far beyond the hidden room I'd originally sought, something that might have been better left undisturbed. The hallway stretched before us, an exact copy of our own. The same cream walls, the same dent where I'd crashed my bike, even the same family photos in identical frames. Everything was perfectly replicated, yet disturbingly wrong. The air was stuffy, and carried that strange, sweet scent I couldn't place. "This is impossible," I said, my voice sounding flat. Lisa stayed close behind me, her breath quick and shallow. "We need to go back." But I was too curious to stop. This discovery went beyond anything I'd imagined when I first started measuring the walls of our house. It wasn't just a hidden room. It was an entire duplicate world. "Let's check your bedroom first," I said, moving toward where Lisa's room would be in our real house. Lisa hesitated. "I don't want to." "Come on, don't you want to know how accurate this copy really is?" With visible reluctance, she followed me down the hall. The floorboards creaked in exactly the same spots as they did in our real house. My mind raced with questions. Who built this? How long had it been here? Why would someone create a perfect replica of our home inside our actual home? We reached Lisa's bedroom door. It stood slightly ajar, just as her real door often did. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The replica of Lisa's room was flawless. Her soccer trophies lined the shelf in the same arrangement. The blue comforter lay rumpled on the bed precisely as she'd left it this morning. Even her clothes from yesterday were draped over the chair in the corner. One crucial difference stood out immediately. "The wall is intact," I said, approaching the spot where I'd created our entrance. "No hole." Lisa stayed by the doorway. "This is seriously freaking me out, John." I ran my hand over the smooth wall where our opening should have been. Solid, undisturbed, as if my hours of work had never happened. I pulled out my phone to check the time. "It's 3:17, I said. My eyes drifted to Lisa's bedside clock. The digital display read 11:43. I watched it for several seconds, waiting for the minute to change. "Look at your clock," I said, pointing. Lisa looked confused. "So?" "Watch it." We both stared at the clock. 10 seconds passed. 20. 30. The display remained frozen at 11:43. "Maybe the battery died," Lisa suggested. I walked over and picked up the clock. It felt solid in my hand, identical to the one in Lisa's actual room. I turned it over and opened the battery compartment. Batteries were there, seemingly normal. "Let's check the other clocks," I said. I set the clock down and began examining the rest of the room. I opened Lisa's drawers, finding perfect copies of her clothes, neatly folded. Her jewelry box contained exact duplicates of her accessories, down to the silver bracelet from her grandmother. "Stop going through my stuff," Lisa said. "It's not actually your stuff," I replied, closing the drawer. "Just copies." Lisa wrapped her arms around herself. "The air feels weird in here." "Wrong how?" "I don't know. It feels hard to breathe, like something's pressing on me." She glanced around nervously. "And I feel like we're not alone." I rolled my eyes, though a chill ran down my spine. "There's nobody here but us." "You don't feel that?" Lisa looked genuinely disturbed. "Like someone's watching?" "It's just the weirdness of seeing a copy of your room. Makes sense you'd feel unsettled." I continued my investigation, touching the bedspread and examining the posters on the wall. Everything felt real, solid and tangible. Not projections or holograms, but physical objects that could have been in use just moments ago, except for the thin layer of dust covering everything. "Let's check my room," I said, heading for the door. Lisa followed quickly, seemingly relieved to leave her duplicate bedroom behind. My replica room was just as disconcerting in its exactness. Every book on my shelf, every poster on my wall, even the dirty socks I'd left on the floor that morning, all recreated in perfect detail. The clock on my wall showed 11:43. I ran my finger along my desk, leaving a trail in the dust. Despite the pristine appearance of everything, a layer of undisturbed dust covered every surface, suggesting years of abandonment. "This doesn't make sense," I said, picking up a baseball from my shelf. "Everything looks brand new, but also abandoned for years." Lisa stood in the doorway, refusing to enter fully. "John, I really think we should go back." "Not yet." I checked the light switch, flipping it up and down. Nothing happened. The strange ambient light continued regardless, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The electricity doesn't work," I noted. "But then what's powering the light?" Lisa shook her head. "I don't want to know. Can we please go now?" "One more room. Let's check Mom and Dad's." I brushed past her into the hallway, drawn forward by the mystery. Part of me registered her fear, but curiosity overwhelmed my caution. This discovery was too significant to abandon. Our parents' bedroom door was closed, unlike our real home, where they usually left it open during the day. I twisted the knob and pushed it open. The replica of their room was immaculate. The bed was perfectly made with hospital corners and precisely arranged pillows, unlike the casual arrangement in their actual room. Dad's reading glasses sat on his nightstand alongside a book I didn't recognize. Mom's jewelry box stood open, her necklaces hanging neatly inside. Something else caught my eye. A black rotary telephone sat on the nightstand on Mom's side of the bed, old-fashioned, with a circular dial and heavy handset. "That's not in their real room," Lisa said, finally stepping into the doorway. "No, it's not." I approached the phone cautiously. "We don't even have landlines anymore." The phone looked antique but pristine, its black surface gleaming in the ambient light. I reached out and picked up the receiver, holding it to my ear. Instead of a dial tone, I heard soft, rhythmic breathing. In, out, in, out. Steady and deliberate. A jolt of fear shot through me. I dropped the receiver, jumping back from the nightstand. The breathing continued, audible even with the receiver on the floor. In, out, in, out. Lisa's eyes widened. "What is it? What's wrong?" "There's someone breathing on the line," I whispered. The steady rhythm of breath flowed from the fallen receiver. Impossible. Disconnected from nothing. Connected to nowhere. Lisa grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now." For the first time since entering this replica house, real fear seized me. This wasn't just a physical impossibility. It was something else entirely. Something wrong. I backed away from the phone, unable to tear my eyes from the receiver on the floor. "You're right," I said, my voice barely audible. "Let's go." We moved into the hallway, Lisa pulling me backward toward where we'd entered. As we retreated, my eyes caught on the family photographs lining the wall, the same ones I'd noticed when we first entered. Something had changed. In our real home, these photos showed our family smiling directly at the camera. Beach trips, Christmas mornings, graduation ceremonies, all captured with everyone facing forward, smiling. These photos were different now. Every face was turned slightly away from the camera. Mom's profile, Dad looking over his shoulder, Lisa looking off to the side, my own face turned towards something out of frame. "The pictures," I whispered. "Look at the pictures." Lisa glanced at them and gasped. They weren't like that before. Were they? No. Everyone was looking at the camera when we came in, I'm sure of it. We stared at the altered photographs, a new level of dread washing over us. This place wasn't just a static replica, it was changing, responding to our presence. "We need to find the door," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "The one we came through." I nodded, finally feeling the full weight of her earlier unease. Something was very wrong with this house. 3 hours into our exploration, I'd nearly filled my phone with photos. This replica of our house had proven to be far more extensive than I initially thought possible. We'd explored most of the rooms, each one an exact but subtly wrong copy of our real home. "We should check the kitchen next," I said, trying to maintain a methodical approach despite my growing unease. Lisa followed reluctantly. She hadn't spoken much in the last hour, staying close behind me as we moved through the replicated rooms. "Are you keeping track of how to get back?" she asked, her voice hushed. "Of course. We just go back up to the attic, through the door, and down the passage to your room." I pointed my flashlight ahead as we descended the stairs. "We've only been gone a few hours." The kitchen appeared at the end of the hallway, illuminated by the same sourceless light as the rest of this place. We entered cautiously, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. Identical to our actual kitchen, but covered in a thin layer of dust. "Check this out," I said, opening the refrigerator. Instead of food, it contained only empty containers arranged in perfect rows. Milk cartons, egg containers, and Tupperware, all spotlessly clean and precisely positioned, but completely empty. Lisa peered over my shoulder. "This is getting creepier by the minute." I closed the refrigerator and moved to the cabinets. The first one revealed a row of identical glass jars filled with a fine white powder. "What is that?" Lisa asked as I carefully removed one of the jars. I unscrewed the lid and examined the contents. The powder was extraordinarily fine, almost like talcum, but with a faint shimmer when it caught the light. I couldn't identify it. "No idea. It's in all the jars." I opened several more cabinets, finding the same white powder in identical containers throughout. "Don't touch it," Lisa warned. I replaced the jar and wiped my fingers on my jeans. I wonder why there's no actual food. Maybe whoever made this place didn't think it was important. Lisa rubbed her arms, shivering. "It's getting colder in here." She was right. The temperature had been steadily dropping the deeper we went into our exploration. I could now see my breath fogging in front of me. "Let's check the backyard," I suggested, moving toward the kitchen door. The back door window revealed a sight that stopped me in my tracks. Instead of our usual backyard with the old oak tree and Mom's garden, an endless expanse of white fog stretched as far as I could see. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a breathing organism. "That's not our yard," Lisa whispered, pressing her face close to the glass. "No, it's not." I stared at the moving fog, unable to look away. I don't think this is just a hidden room anymore. This might be another dimension entirely. Like in your science fiction books? Something like that. My mind raced with possibilities. Maybe whoever built this house created some kind of gateway between worlds. I pulled out my pocket knife and scratched a small X into the kitchen wall. "I want to test something. Let's go back to our house for a minute." Lisa looked relieved at the suggestion. Finally. We retraced our steps through the replica house, past the altered family photos, back to the upstairs hallway. Everything remained exactly as we'd left it, yet somehow different in ways I couldn't quite identify. The atmosphere felt more oppressive, making it harder to breathe. We climbed the stairs to the attic, found the door we'd unlocked, and made our way back to Lisa's actual bedroom through the wall opening I'd created. The transition was jarring. Bright sunlight streamed through Lisa's windows. The air was warm and fresh, and normal house sounds surrounded us. I checked my phone. 3:45 p.m. We'd been in the replica house for just over 3 hours. "Let me check something," I said, leading the way downstairs to our kitchen. The real kitchen was bright and lived in, completely different from its sterile replica. I went straight to the wall where I'd scratched the X in the other kitchen. There it was, a faint but unmistakable X etched into the paint. "Lisa, look." I pointed to the mark. What I did over there affected our real house. She examined the scratch with wide eyes. "How is that possible?" "I don't know, but it proves there's a connection between the two places." I grabbed a water bottle from the fridge and took a long drink, suddenly aware of how thirsty I was. "We need to check the basement next." Lisa hesitated. "I'm not sure we should go back in there at all." "Don't you want to understand what this is? This could be the discovery of the century. Or it could be dangerous." She took the water bottle from my hand and drank. "Haven't you noticed how much colder it gets the longer we stay? And those photographs changing?" I considered this. The rational part of my brain recognized the warning signs, but my curiosity was too powerful to ignore. "Just the basement, then we'll come back and figure out what to do next." I grabbed my digital camera from the living room. "I want better photos than what my phone can take." Lisa sighed, recognizing my stubbornness. "Fine. But if anything else weird happens, we leave immediately. Promise?" "Promise." We filled another water bottle, grabbed some protein bars from the pantry, and returned to Lisa's room. The hole in her wall seemed darker somehow, more threatening. I went through first, Lisa following close behind. The replica house felt noticeably colder than before. Breathing was getting harder with each step. We made our way back through the attic and down into the house proper. "Let's try the basement," I said, heading for the stairs. In our real house, the basement was Dad's workshop, a cluttered space filled with tools, half-finished projects, and storage boxes. When we reached the bottom of the replica stairs, what we found was entirely different. The replica basement was a single empty concrete room. No tools, no workbenches, no storage. Just bare walls, a concrete floor, and a single wooden chair placed in the center, facing the far wall. "This doesn't match our basement at all," Lisa whispered. I approached the chair cautiously. "No, this is completely different." As I moved closer to the wall the chair faced, I noticed faint scratches in the concrete. They formed words, repeated over and over. "Don't stay after dark. Don't stay after dark. Don't stay after dark." The message covered the entire wall in tiny, desperate scratches. "John." Lisa's voice trembled. "I think we need to leave. Now." I stared at the warning etched into the wall, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold air. "Let me just take some pictures first." I raised my camera and began documenting the basement, the chair, and the scratched warnings. Lisa moved closer to the stairs. "Hurry up." I took a few more photos, then joined her. "Okay, let's check upstairs one more time. Then we can go." "You promised we'd leave if things got weirder," she protested. "And we will. I just want to grab some of that white powder from the kitchen for analysis." Lisa looked ready to argue, but eventually nodded. "Fine. But we're in and out, okay?" We climbed the stairs, the temperature dropping further with each step. At the top, I stopped abruptly. The front door, visible from the stairwell, had changed. Strange symbols now adorned its frame. curved lines and angular marks that looked like no language I'd ever seen. "Those weren't there before," Lisa whispered. "No, they weren't." I approached the door, camera ready. "This place is changing." I took several photos of the symbols, then reviewed the pictures I'd taken earlier. What I saw made my blood run cold. In the background of several images, indistinct figures stood in doorways and hallways, figures that hadn't been visible when I took the photos. "Lisa, look at this." I showed her the screen. She gasped. "Those weren't there. I would have seen them." "I know." I scrolled through more photos, finding similar shadow figures in many of them. Something is happening here. We moved toward the kitchen, both of us now on high alert. The hallway seemed longer than before, the shadows deeper. When we reached the kitchen, I immediately noticed that the jars had rearranged themselves on the shelves. "These were in a different order before," I said, opening a cabinet. Lisa stood in the doorway, unwilling to enter fully. "Can we please just go now?" I grabbed one of the jars and stuffed it into my pocket. "Okay, let's go." As we turned to leave, a whisper drifted from the empty dining room, too faint to make out words, but unmistakably a voice. Lisa grabbed my arm. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, my scientific curiosity finally giving way to genuine fear. "Time to go." We hurried back through the house, past the altered photographs and the strange door symbols. The ambient light had dimmed noticeably since we'd arrived, creating deep shadows in corners and doorways. The temperature had dropped so low that our breath came out in thick white clouds. Another whisper followed us up the stairs, slightly louder but still incomprehensible. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Faster," Lisa urged, pushing ahead of me now. We reached the attic, rushed to the door, and passed through it with relief. The moment we closed it behind us, the whispering stopped. We hurried down the wooden passage and squeezed back through the hole into Lisa's actual bedroom. The contrast was stark. Warm air, natural sunlight, normal sounds. Safety. I sat heavily on Lisa's bed, the jar of white powder still in my pocket. "What is this place we've found, Lisa?" She stood by the window, putting distance between herself and the wall. "Something we shouldn't have disturbed." I couldn't argue with that. The warning scratched into the basement wall echoed in my mind. "Don't stay after dark." "We need to figure out what this is," I said, pulling out the jar to examine it. The white powder shimmered unnaturally in the sunlight. "And we need to do it before dark." The afternoon was already advancing. According to my phone, it was nearly 5:30 p.m. We had maybe 3 hours before nightfall. "No way," Lisa said firmly. "We're not going back in there, especially not as it gets dark." I stared at the hole in her wall, thinking about all we'd seen. The impossible fog, the warnings, the whispering, the figures in my photos. "You're right," I admitted finally. "But we can't just ignore this either." Lisa wrapped her arms around herself. "What do we do now?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that we'd discovered something far beyond a simple hidden room, something impossible and potentially dangerous. And whatever it was, it seemed to be aware of us. I sat on the edge of Lisa's bed, still staring at the hole in the wall. We'd discovered something impossible, a replica of our house existing in some hidden dimension. "What time is it?" Lisa asked, breaking the silence. I checked my phone. "Almost 6:30. "Sunset's in about an hour," she said, eyeing the hole with distrust. I suddenly bolted upright. "My camera. I left it in the kitchen when we ran." "So?" "Leave it," Lisa said. "I can't. It has all the photos of the symbols, the basement, everything." I stood up, determination overriding my better judgment. "We need evidence of what we found." Lisa shook her head firmly. "You're not going back in there. We have plenty of time before dark. Quick in and out, 5 minutes tops." "No way." "Lisa, that camera is the only proof we have. What if something happens to the passage?" What if it closes up? She stared at me, conflict evident in her expression. 5 minutes. That's it. I nodded, already moving toward the wall opening. I promise. The passage felt colder than before, our flashlight beams weaker against the darkness. We moved quickly through the narrow corridor and up the stairs to the attic space. When we reached the door leading to the replica house, I hesitated for the first time, my hand hovering over the handle. "Still time to change your mind," Lisa whispered. I pushed the door open in response. The replica house had changed. The ambient light had dimmed significantly, making corners and doorways darker. What had seemed merely strange earlier now seemed threatening. The air felt thick and difficult to breathe. "Kitchen, then straight back," I whispered, my voice sounding muffled. We moved down the hall past the family photographs. I forced myself not to look at them, afraid of what changes we might see. The floor creaked beneath our feet with each step, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. The kitchen doorway appeared ahead, very dark inside. I swept my flashlight across the space. My camera sat exactly where I'd left it on the counter, its lens reflecting the light back at us. "Got it," I said, rushing forward to grab it. Lisa followed reluctantly, standing just inside the doorway. "Hurry up!" I pocketed the camera and turned to leave when Lisa suddenly froze. Her eyes locked on something beyond the kitchen window, widening with pure terror. Her mouth opened in a silent scream before finding her voice. "John!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger toward the glass. I spun around, following her gaze to the window. Beyond it, the white fog continued its slow, pulsing movement. I saw nothing else. "What? What is it?" I asked, scanning the misty expanse. "There's someone out there," she whispered, backing away. "Someone watching us." I looked harder, squinting into the fog. "I don't see anyone." "He was right there," she insisted, her voice rising with panic. Tall, just standing in the fog, staring at us. A loud crack made us both jump. Then another, and another. All around us, cabinet doors flew open simultaneously, slamming against their frames. White powder, identical to what I'd collected in the jar, spilled from every cabinet, pouring onto the floor in impossible quantities. Lisa screamed, backing toward the door. I stood paralyzed, watching as the powder began to move on its own, swirling across the floor, making distinct patterns. Footprints. They tracked across the kitchen floor, heading directly toward us. "Run!" I shouted, finally breaking free of my shock. Lisa bolted from the kitchen. I followed close behind, chasing her through the dining room. Behind us, more cabinets slammed open and closed, a cacophony of wooden crashes that seemed to follow our path. The temperature plummeted as we ran through the replica living room. My breath came out in thick white clouds, my fingers numbing in seconds. We reached the stairs and took them two at a time, the wood groaning beneath our feet. A door slammed somewhere behind us, then another ahead of us. The house was reacting to our presence, trying to trap us inside. "This way," I gasped, pulling Lisa toward where her bedroom should be. Whispers filled the hallway as we ran, unintelligible voices speaking just below the threshold of understanding. The voices seemed to come from inside the walls themselves, following our movements. We reached Lisa's replica bedroom door and threw it open. The room inside had changed completely. Her furniture remained in place, but the wall where our passage should be had transformed. The hole was there, but it no longer led to our world. Instead, it opened into absolute darkness, a void deeper than any natural shadow. "That's not our way out," Lisa cried, backing away from the impossible darkness. "The attic," I said. "We need to find the original door." We turned and ran back toward the stairs, the whispers growing louder behind us. The hallway seemed to stretch as we ran, each step covering less distance than it should have. The house was trying to keep us here. We finally reached the attic stairs and climbed them frantically. The door to our world was still there, but something was wrong. The frame was contracting slowly, the opening narrowing like a closing mouth. Through the shrinking gap, I could see the dusty passage that led back to our house. "It's closing," Lisa yelled, pushing ahead of me. She reached the door first and squeezed through the narrowing opening. I followed immediately after, feeling the edges of the frame scrape against my shoulders as I pushed through. The space had shrunk to barely a foot wide. I tumbled into the passage beyond, turning back just in time to see the door seal itself completely, the seam vanishing as if it had never existed. We ran through the passage without speaking, scrambling through the hole in Lisa's wall and collapsing onto her bedroom floor. Safe. Home. "Help me," I gasped, standing on shaky legs. I dragged her desk across the room and positioned it in front of the opening. Lisa understood immediately, pulling her bookshelf over to stack in front of the desk. "We need to seal it completely," she said, her voice still trembling. We spent the next 20 minutes barricading the hole with every piece of furniture we could move. When we finished, Lisa sank onto her stripped bed, staring at the wall of furniture. "What just happened in there?" she whispered. I shook my head, struggling to process what we'd experienced. "I don't know. But I think that house, or whatever it is, doesn't want us to leave." "You didn't see him, did you? The man in the fog?" "No. But I believe you saw something." I remembered the footprints forming in the white powder, tracking toward us across the kitchen floor. "I think there's something alive in there, something that doesn't want to stay there anymore." Lisa hugged herself tightly. "We can't tell Mom and Dad about this." Agreed. They'd never believe us anyway. I placed my camera on her nightstand. "But we have evidence now." We spent the remainder of the evening in the living room, jumping at every creak and groan of the house. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge our shared fear that something from that place might have followed us back. When we finally returned to our rooms for the night, exhaustion overcame my fear. I collapsed onto my bed without changing clothes, the events of the day crashing over me like a wave. I woke sometime after midnight to a faint sound. Scratching, soft but persistent, coming from inside Lisa's wall. I lay frozen, listening to the steady scrape, 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 like fingernails dragging across the other side of the drywall. Something wanted to get out. I must have fallen back asleep eventually, because the next thing I knew, morning light was streaming through my window. I sat up groggily, my memories of the previous day crashing back. Something white caught my eye on the floor. A thin trail of white powder led from my doorway to my bed. The same powder from the replica house cabinets. I looked down at my clothes from yesterday. Fine white dust clung to the fabric. Somehow the substance had transferred to us during our escape. I followed the powder trail to my door. Instead of footprints or a random scattering, the powder had arranged itself into a distinct pattern overnight, a series of strange symbols identical to those we'd seen on the replica house's front door. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Come to my room, now." I found her standing in her doorway, staring at her floor. The white powder covered her carpet in the same symbols found in my room, but with one addition. In the center of her floor, the powder had formed the numbers 1143. "It's coming through somehow," she whispered. "John, what have we done?" I jolted awake in the darkness. Something had pulled me from sleep. Not a sound, but a feeling. The sensation of being watched. My room was freezing. The air had turned so cold that my breath clouded in front of my face when I exhaled. This wasn't normal. Even in winter, our house never got this cold. I lay perfectly still, eyes adjusting to the darkness. A shape stood beside my bed, tall, motionless, just standing there, watching. My hand inched toward the lamp on my nightstand, muscles tensed for a quick escape if needed. The shape didn't move. It stayed very still, a dark outline against the darkness of my room. I clicked the lamp on. Nothing. The space beside my bed was empty. I checked every corner of my room. Nothing looked disturbed, but my door stood open to the hallway. I was certain I'd closed it before going to bed. After what we'd experienced in the replica house, I remembered specifically checking the lock twice. The chill remained even with the light on. Goosebumps covered my arms as I slipped out of bed, half convinced something would grab my ankles the moment they touched the floor. I needed to check on Lisa. The hallway was dark and silent as I moved toward her room. Each creaking floorboard sounded impossibly loud. I kept looking over my shoulder, unable to shake the feeling of being followed. I knocked softly on Lisa's door. "Lisa," I whispered. "You awake?" No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Come in," her voice finally answered, small and frightened. I pushed the door open. Lisa sat upright in bed, knees pulled to her chest, blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She trembled, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "You felt it too?" I asked. She nodded. "There was someone in my room, John." I crossed to her bed and sat on the edge. "I thought I saw something in mine too." "What did you see?" Lisa's voice shook. "A man, tall, too tall. His arms and legs were wrong, too long, like they had extra joints. He was wearing clothes like Dad's, but they didn't fit right." She swallowed. "And his face, it looked like Dad, but wrong somehow. Like someone trying to remember what Dad looks like, but getting the details wrong." A chill ran down my spine. "Where did it go?" I asked. I blinked and it was gone. "But I can still feel it, John. It's still in the house." She glanced at the barricade we'd built in front of the hole in her wall. "I think it followed us back." I nodded. The scratching I'd heard in the night suddenly made terrible sense. "I'm not going back to sleep, are you?" Lisa shook her head violently. "No way." "Let's go downstairs. We'll turn on all the lights." We took blankets and pillows to the living room, flipping on every light switch we passed. The brightness helped, pushing back the shadows and making the house feel more normal. We settled on the couch, facing the stairs so nothing could approach without us seeing it. "What do we do if it comes back?" Lisa whispered. "I don't know." I had no plan, no explanation for what was happening. "Mom and Dad will be home tomorrow. Maybe we should tell them everything." Lisa looked doubtful. "They'll never believe us. They'll think we damaged the wall for no reason." She was right. Without experiencing it themselves, our parents would dismiss our story as imagination or an elaborate prank gone wrong. We sat in silence after that, jumping at every normal house sound. The refrigerator running, the heating system clicking on, the windows expanding slightly in their frames. Neither of us slept. We just waited for morning, watching the darkness gradually fade as dawn approached. The sound of a car in the driveway finally broke our tense vigil. Headlights swept across the living room walls. "They're back early," I said, checking my phone. It was barely 7 a.m. Lisa and I exchanged nervous glances. We looked like hell, pale with dark circles under our eyes, still wearing yesterday's clothes. There was no way our parents wouldn't notice. The front door opened, and Mom walked in first, pulling her suitcase behind her. She stopped short when she saw us. "What are you two doing up so early?" she asked. "And why are all the lights on?" Dad followed behind her, setting down his bags. "Movie marathon?" he guessed, smiling. I forced a casual shrug. "Something like that. We couldn't sleep." Mom approached, her expression changing to concern as she got a better look at us. "You both look exhausted. Are you feeling okay?" She pressed a hand to my forehead, checking for fever. "We're fine," Lisa said quickly. "Just stayed up too late." Mom didn't seem convinced, but Dad was already heading upstairs with their luggage. "Let me get these bags upstairs, then I'll make some breakfast. You two look like you could use some food." As soon as he disappeared up the stairs, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. He was going to pass Lisa's room. He would notice the furniture piled against the wall. Lisa realized it too. Her face went even paler. "Teenagers," Mom said, shaking her head fondly as she headed toward the kitchen. always staying up too late. Was the house okay while we were gone? No wild parties? No parties, I managed to say. My eyes remained fixed on the stairs, waiting for Dad's inevitable discovery. It came faster than I expected. What the hell? Dad's voice boomed from upstairs. Lisa, John, get up here now. Mom's head snapped around toward the stairs. Robert, what's wrong? Lisa and I exchanged a look of pure dread before heading upstairs. We found Dad standing in Lisa's room, pushing aside the furniture barricade we'd created. The hole in the wall was fully exposed now, the raw edges of drywall and wooden studs visible. What is this? Dad demanded, gesturing at the damage. What did you do to the wall? Mom appeared behind us, gasping when she saw the hole. Oh my God. What happened? I stepped forward, trying to come up with an explanation that wouldn't sound insane. I noticed that this wall seemed different from the others, I began, sticking as close to the truth as possible. The measurements didn't match the outside dimensions of the house, so I thought there might be a hidden space. Dad's eyes narrowed. So you decided to tear apart the wall? Without permission? I know it was wrong, I said quickly. I should have waited until you got home, but once I started, I found this passage. It's an old service corridor or something. A service corridor? Dad moved closer to the hole, examining it with professional interest. As a structural engineer, he couldn't help but be curious despite his anger. That's not on any of the house plans. We went in to explore, Lisa added, following my partial truth approach. It was dusty and old. We got scared and came back out. Dad knelt down to peer into the hole. I noticed with a sinking feeling that some of the white powder was still visible on the floor of the passage. As Dad leaned in, his sleeve brushed against the edge of the hole. When he straightened up, fine white powder clung to his shirt cuff. This could be serious, he said, his tone changing from anger to professional concern. Hidden spaces like this can compromise the structure of the house. There could be water damage, mold, electrical hazards. He stood up, dusting off his hands. I need to examine this properly. Robert, the kids were just curious, Mom said, trying to defuse the situation, though you two should have known better than to damage the house. Dad wasn't listening. He was still staring at the hole, his expression oddly blank. When he finally turned to face us, something about his movements seemed wrong, like he was operating his body by remote control. I'll need to check how far this extends, he said. His voice sounded normal, but there was a slight delay between his words and the expressions on his face, as if he was remembering how to appear concerned rather than actually feeling it. Dad? I said hesitantly. Are you okay? He blinked, the motion unnaturally slow. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? The smile that followed came a beat too late, like an afterthought. Mom didn't seem to notice anything unusual. Robert, you just got home. This can wait until after you've had some rest and breakfast. No, Dad said firmly. This needs immediate attention. Structural issues can't wait. He turned back to the hole, and I saw it then. A fine dusting of the white powder across the back of his neck, just below his hairline. The same powder that had formed the strange symbols on our floors. The same powder from the replica house. Dad reached toward the hole again, his fingers approaching the edge with an almost reverent slowness. Dad, maybe we should call a contractor, I suggested, fighting to keep my voice steady. This might be dangerous. He paused, then turned to look at me. For a second, I could have sworn his pupils expanded, becoming too large for his eyes. Don't worry, he said. His voice sounded almost normal, but something in it raised the hairs on my arms. I know exactly what I'm doing. Lisa edged closer to me, grabbing my hand and squeezing it hard. She'd noticed it too. Why don't you kids go get some sleep? Mom suggested, misreading our tension. You look exhausted and your father and I can handle this. Dad nodded, that delayed smile appearing again. Yes, You two should rest. I'll take care of everything." The way he said it made my stomach twist. Whatever had followed us back from the replica house hadn't just left strange symbols of powder. It had found a way to cross over more completely, and it was wearing my father like a suit that didn't quite fit. Dad insisted on fixing the wall that same day. I watched from the doorway of Lisa's room as he worked methodically, measuring and cutting drywall with precise movements. His focus seemed too intense, his eyes never blinking as he sealed the passage that led to the replica house. "It wasn't this bad," I said, pointing to a section where he'd expanded the repair beyond the original hole. "You don't need to replace that part." Dad didn't look up. Better to be thorough. Mom brought him a sandwich for lunch, but it sat untouched on Lisa's desk while he worked. He stayed at it until well past midnight, the sounds of his tools echoing through the house as Lisa and I exchanged worried glances across the dinner table. By morning, the wall was perfectly repaired, no sign that a hole had ever existed. Dad stood before it, admiring his work with an expression that didn't quite match the situation. Pride mixed with something else. Anticipation, maybe. "Good as new," he announced, his voice flat despite the cheerful words. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes and how he swayed slightly where he stood. "Did you sleep at all last night, Dad?" "No need." He turned to face me, and I flinched involuntarily. His pupils were too large, almost swallowing the blue of his irises. His look seemed unfocused, looking at me, but somehow through me at the same time. That was day 1. By day 3, Mom started noticing. "Robert, you need to eat something," she insisted at dinner, as Dad stared at his full plate. "You haven't touched your food in days." Dad blinked slowly, that disturbing delay between thought and action more pronounced. "Not hungry." "You haven't slept either," she pressed. "I'm worried about you." "No need to worry," he replied with that same delayed smile. "I feel fine. Better than fine." He excused himself and returned to Lisa's room, where he'd installed a desk and chair facing the repaired wall. He spent hours there, just sitting and staring at the blank surface. I needed information. The house's history seemed like the logical place to start. While Dad maintained his strange vigil and Mom tried to pretend everything was normal, I biked to the county records office and dug through property documents. Our house was built in 1941 by a man named Edward Chambers. The clerk found me additional information when I explained I was doing a school project on local architecture. "Chambers was quite the eccentric," she said, placing a yellowed newspaper clipping on the counter. "Brilliant physicist who suddenly abandoned his career at the university to build this house." The black and white photograph showed a thin man with wild hair standing proudly in front of our house during its construction. Something about his intense expression reminded me of Dad's recent stare. "What happened to him?" I asked. "Disappeared without a trace in 1943. The police report noted the time of his last confirmed sighting, 11:43 a.m. on October 17th. My blood ran cold. 11:43. The time frozen on all the clocks in the replica house, the numbers that had appeared in white powder on Lisa's floor. I made copies of everything and continued my research at the public library, where archived newspapers revealed more about Chambers. He had published several theoretical papers about dimensional physics before his disappearance. His last published work had explored the possibility of creating echoes of our reality, parallel spaces existing alongside our own dimension. The library's microfiche collection contained an interview where Chambers claimed to be building his home as both living space and laboratory for his dimensional experiments. He believed that with proper architectural alignment and mathematical precision, he could create a doorway between worlds. I returned home with my findings to discover Lisa huddled in the living room, as far from her bedroom as possible. "I keep seeing him," she whispered when I sat beside her. "That tall figure. He's always at the edge of my vision, watching me." "The man you saw in the fog?" I asked, setting my research aside. She nodded, pulling her knees to her chest. He follows me around the house. When I turn to look directly at him, he's gone. But I can feel him watching. Lisa had taken to checking behind doors and inside closets before entering any room. She refused to sleep alone, camping out on the floor of Mom's home office rather than return to her bedroom. "Has Mom noticed anything weird?" I asked. "She dropped a coffee mug this morning," Lisa said. "Claimed it was pulled out of her hand, and she keeps looking over her shoulder like she hears someone behind her." That night, Mom confirmed Lisa's observation. We were cleaning up after dinner while Dad sat motionless in Lisa's room. "I know this sounds crazy," Mom said quietly, glancing toward the stairs, "but I think someone else is in the house." She dried a plate with mechanical movements, her eyes constantly scanning the kitchen. "Things move when I'm not looking. I hear footsteps when everyone is accounted for. Yesterday, all the cabinet doors were open when I came home from the store." "Do you think it has something to do with Dad?" I asked cautiously. She set the plate down with deliberate care. "I don't know what's wrong with him. He hasn't slept in days, won't eat, won't talk about anything except how perfect the wall is now." Her voice cracked slightly. "It's like he's not himself anymore." I decided it was time for evidence. After everyone went to bed, I set up my laptop's webcam in the upstairs hallway, positioned to capture the entrance to Lisa's room. I placed my old phone camera in her room, hidden on her bookshelf with a clear view of Dad's chair and the repaired wall. For 4 nights, I collected footage, reviewing it each morning with growing dread. The hallway camera caught doors opening and closing on their own. Shadows moved across walls when everyone was accounted for. Most disturbing was the footage from Lisa's room. Each night around 3 a.m., Dad would enter. He didn't use the door. He simply appeared in the frame, standing before the wall. He placed both hands against the surface and leaned forward until his forehead touched the drywall. Then he would whisper for hours in a language I didn't recognize. The sounds guttural and rhythmic, nothing like any human speech I'd heard before. By the 7th day, thin lines of white powder appeared along the baseboards throughout the house. Electronics malfunctioned when Dad walked past them. Lights flickered. The TV turned to static. My phone's battery drained instantly if he came near. I showed Mom the footage that morning while Dad sat in Lisa's room and Lisa kept watch downstairs. "This isn't possible," Mom whispered, her face pale as she watched Dad on the screen whispering to the wall. "What's happening to him?" "I don't think that's entirely Dad anymore," I said, explaining my research about Edward Chambers and his dimensional experiments. "I think something followed us back from that hidden place behind the wall. Something that's been trapped there since 1943. Mom's scientific mind struggled against what she was seeing. "This is impossible. People don't get possessed." "Not possessed," I corrected. "Replaced, or maybe overwritten. Whatever this is, it's changing him physically. Have you noticed his eyes?" She nodded slowly. "And his voice. Sometimes it doesn't sound like him at all." That evening, I confronted Dad directly. I found him sitting in Lisa's room as usual, staring at the wall. "We need to talk," I said from the doorway. He turned with that unsettling delay, his 2 large pupils fixing on me. "About what, son?" The words were right, but the inflection was wrong, like someone reading from a script they didn't understand. "About what you're doing at night. About why you're not eating or sleeping." I stepped into the room, smartphone in hand. "I have video of you talking to the wall." Something moved across his face. Irritation, maybe, or calculation. "You're imagining things. I've been in bed every night." I held up my phone, showing him the footage. "This is you, last night at 3:17 a.m. Dad's expression changed as he watched himself whispering to the wall. For a moment, confusion crossed his features. Genuine confusion that looked like the real Dad breaking through. "I don't remember," he started, his voice suddenly normal. Then his face went blank again, pupils expanding until almost no iris remained. "It's nothing to worry about. Just sleepwalking." "Dad, We need to get you help. Something's wrong." "Nothing is wrong," he snapped with sudden ferocity. "The wall is perfect now, better than before, stronger." He stood abruptly, swaying slightly. White powder drifted from his sleeves, settling on the carpet in patterns I recognized. "You need to stay out of this room," he continued, advancing toward me. "All of you. This room is special now." I stood my ground. "We're worried about you. Mom's worried. You haven't been yourself since—" "Since what?" he demanded, now uncomfortably close. "Since you damaged the structural integrity of this house? Since you opened a door that should have remained closed?" His voice dropped to a whisper, but not Dad's whisper. This was deeper, resonant, with that strange cadence I'd heard in the videos. "You have no idea what you've done," this new voice said through Dad's mouth. "What you've allowed to cross back over." "Who are you?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "What have you done to my father?" Dad's face contorted into a smile that stretched too wide. "I am becoming. Your father is accommodating me, as the girl will accommodate another, the woman another, all of you vessels." I backed toward the door. "We're not going to let that happen." Dad lunged forward with impossible speed, grabbing my arm. His grip was inhumanly strong, fingers digging into my flesh. "You have no choice," the deep voice said. "The crossing has begun. 11:43 approaches again." I wrenched away, stumbling into the hallway. Dad followed, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "Do not interfere," he warned, his voice fluctuating between the deep tone and Dad's normal voice. "The door must open fully." "What door?" "The passage is sealed," I said, continuing to back away. Dad's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "For now. But walls can be opened again." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a utility knife, the same one he'd used to repair the wall. I realized what he intended. "Dad, fight this. Whatever's controlling you, you can push it back." For a moment, something like recognition appeared in his eyes. "John?" Dad's normal voice emerged, confused and frightened. "What's happening to me?" Before I could answer, his expression hardened again, pupils expanding to blacken his eyes entirely. "Enough," the deep voice commanded. Dad turned back to Lisa's room, knife in hand. I followed cautiously, watching as he approached the repaired wall. He placed his palm flat against the surface, and I noticed with horror that the drywall seemed to ripple beneath his touch. "The boundary is thinnest here," he said, "where it was broken before." He raised the knife to the wall. I lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "Stop!" Dad, or whatever was controlling him, spun with unnatural quickness. The knife slashed through the air inches from my face. I stumbled backward, knocking into Lisa's desk. The lamp crashed to the floor, bulb shattering. In the sudden dimness, Dad's figure seemed to waver, his outline blurring slightly. White powder drifted from his clothes and hair, swirling around him. The knife glinted as he advanced toward me. "You will not prevent the crossing," he said in that terrible voice. "This vessel is mine now. Others will follow." I scrambled backward into the hallway. "Mom! Lisa! Stay downstairs!" I shouted. The entity wearing my father stepped through the doorway. The overhead light flickered violently as he passed beneath it, then burned out with a pop, plunging the hallway into darkness. "Dad, if you can hear me, you need to fight this," I pleaded, feeling my way along the wall toward my bedroom. "Whatever's controlling you, it's the thing from the replica house. It's using you to get through." A chilling laugh emerged from the darkness. "Your father can hear you. He is diminishing. Soon, only I will remain." My hand found my doorknob. I flung the door open and dove inside, slamming it behind me. I turned the lock just as Dad's weight crashed against the wood. "You cannot hide," the voice said as the knife blade punched through the door at eye level. "The crossing happens with or without your cooperation." I backed away, frantically searching for anything I could use as a weapon. The blade withdrew, then plunged through the door again, creating another hole. Wood splintered as Dad, the thing controlling Dad, began systematically destroying the door. Behind me, my computer screen flared to life, though it wasn't plugged in. White lines formed across the black screen, arranging themselves into a sequence of symbols identical to those we'd seen in the replica house. The pounding on my door stopped suddenly. In the silence that followed, I heard Mom's voice from downstairs. "Robert, what's happening up there?" Heavy footsteps moved away from my door, heading toward the stairs, toward Mom and Lisa. I frantically pulled out my phone, but the screen went black the moment I tried to use it. Every electronic device in my room was dead or malfunctioning. Outside my window, the streetlights flickered and died, plunging our entire street into darkness. Through my broken door, I could see white powder floating in the hallway, swirling in complex patterns that seemed almost purposeful. It was freezing cold now, my breath forming visible clouds in front of me. I realized with terrible clarity that what we'd experienced in the replica house was just the beginning. Whatever existed in that parallel dimension wasn't content to remain there. It was coming through, using Dad as its doorway. And if we couldn't stop it, we'd all be next. "Mom! Lisa! Get out of the house!" I yelled as I fumbled my way toward the stairs. The white powder floated through the air, catching what little moonlight seeped through the windows. It outlined Dad's silhouette as he descended the stairs, knife still clutched in his hand. His movements were wrong, too fluid in some places, too jerky in others, like a poorly operated puppet. I heard Lisa scream from the living room. The sound propelled me forward. "Dad, stop!" I shouted, though I knew it wasn't really him anymore. Whatever had followed us back from the replica house had consumed him almost completely. By the time I reached the bottom of the stairs, Dad had cornered Mom and Lisa against the living room wall. The knife glinted in the darkness as he raised it. "You must all return with me," he said in that terrible voice that wasn't his own. "The balance must be restored." Mom shielded Lisa with her body. "Robert, please, this isn't you." Dad tilted his head at that unnatural angle. "Robert is diminishing. Soon, only I will remain." He lunged forward, grabbing Lisa's arm with his free hand. She screamed as he dragged her toward the stairs. "She will be first," the entity said through Dad's mouth. "The youngest is most compatible." I didn't think, just acted. I grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the side table and swung it with all my strength. It connected with the back of Dad's head with a sickening thud. He crumpled to the floor, the knife clattering across the hardwood. Lisa scrambled away, sobbing. Mom rushed to check on Dad, her hands trembling as she felt for a pulse. "He's alive," she said, relief washing over her face. "John, what have you done?" "That's not Dad," I said, my voice shaking. At least not entirely. Something's controlling him, using him. Mom looked up at me, finally accepting the undeniable evidence. "We need to restrain him before he wakes up." We worked quickly, using extension cords to bind Dad's wrists and ankles. Even unconscious, white powder continued to seep from his pores, forming those strange symbols on the floor around him. "Who can we call?" Lisa asked, wiping tears from her face. "The police will think we're crazy." I remembered Mom's old friend, Dr. Bennett. "Mom, didn't you say he studies paranormal phenomena?" Mom nodded, already reaching for her phone. "Elias has always had unconventional research interests. If anyone might understand this, it's him." Dr. Bennett arrived 40 minutes later. By then, Dad had regained consciousness and was straining against his bindings, alternating between confused pleas in his normal voice and threatening growls in the entity's deeper tones. Dr. Bennett took one look at Dad and the white powder surrounding him and set his briefcase on the coffee table. "You were right to call me, Margaret," he said, his voice calm despite the bizarre scene. "How long has he been like this?" "A week," Mom replied. "Getting worse each day." Dr. Bennett knelt beside Dad, careful not to touch the white powder. He observed the strange symbols it formed, occasionally nodding to himself. And it started after the children discovered something behind a wall. I stepped forward. A passage to what seemed like a replica of our house. But things were different there. Wrong. Dr. Bennett opened his briefcase and removed a small vial of clear liquid. "This substance," he said, gesturing to the white powder, "is extremely rare. In my field, we call it liminal matter. It only exists at the boundaries between dimensions." "Dimensions? Like in science fiction?" Lisa asked. "Like in theoretical physics," Dr. Bennett corrected gently. He uncapped the vial. "This might help temporarily." He sprinkled the liquid in a circle around Dad. Where it touched the white powder, the substance hissed and dissipated, leaving clean floor behind. Dad's thrashing subsided slightly. "That will contain it for a while," Dr. Bennett said. "Now, tell me everything." For the next hour, Lisa and I recounted our discovery of the passage, our exploration of the replica house, and everything that happened afterward. Dr. Bennett listened intently, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound journal. "The house's original owner was Edward Chambers," I explained, showing him my research. "He disappeared in 1943 at 11:43 a.m. Dr. Bennett nodded. "Chambers was brilliant but reckless. I've studied his work. He believed he could create a perfect parallel dimension, a mirror of our world where he could experiment without consequences." "So the replica house isn't just a copy?" Mom asked. "No," Dr. Bennett said gravely. "It's an actual parallel version of your house, frozen at the moment Chambers conducted his experiment, 11:43 a.m., October 17th, 1943. For nearly 8 decades, that pocket dimension has existed alongside ours, separated by only the thinnest of barriers. And we broke through that barrier," I said, finally realizing what we'd done. "Yes. And in doing so, you allowed something to cross over." Dr. Bennett glanced at Dad, who had gone unsettlingly still. "I believe what's possessing Robert is Chambers himself, or what remains of his consciousness after decades of isolation in a pocket dimension. He's attempting to escape by trading places with your father." Lisa shuddered. "He wanted me to go through the wall, said I was most compatible." "He needs to transfer all of you to maintain balance," Dr. Bennett explained. "A life for a life. Physics demands equilibrium between dimensions." "How do we stop it?" Mom asked, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. Dr. Bennett removed several objects from his briefcase: bundles of dried herbs, small stones carved with symbols, and what looked like a very old map. "We need to seal the breach permanently," he said. "It will require a ritual at specific points throughout the house, culminating at the original entry point." "The hole in Lisa's wall," I said. "But Dad, I mean the entity, repaired it. The physical wall may be repaired, but the dimensional breach remains." "In fact," Dr. Bennett said, studying Dad closely, "he's been preparing to reopen it more fully. That's why he's been sitting in that room, communing with the wall." Dad's eyes snapped open at that moment, completely black now, not even whites visible. "You cannot close what has been opened," the deep voice said. "The crossing must be completed." Dr. Bennett remained unfazed. "Hello, Edward. It's been a long time." Dad's face contorted in confusion. "You know me?" "I've studied your work for decades," Dr. Bennett replied. "Your theories about dimensional physics were revolutionary. But this," he gestured to Dad's body, "this is not what you intended, is it?" Something like uncertainty flickered across Dad's face. "The experiment succeeded. I created a perfect replica, and trapped yourself within it for 80 years, Dr. Bennett said. Alone, watching through windows as life continued without you. Dad struggled against his bindings. I am becoming again. Physical. Real. At the expense of Robert and his family." Dr. Bennett's voice was gentle but firm. "That's not science, Edward. That's theft. the entity hissed, white powder swirling around Dad more violently. "I deserve to return. I've been trapped long enough." Dr. Bennett turned to us. "We need to begin the ritual immediately. The entity is growing stronger." He instructed us to place the carved stones at specific points throughout the house: north, south, east, and west corners, plus the center of the ground floor. Mom took the north and east positions while Lisa handled south and west. I placed one in the center of the living room, careful to stay clear of Dad. Dr. Bennett lit bundles of herbs, filling the house with pungent smoke. He unfolded the map on the coffee table, revealing not a conventional map, but a diagram of intersecting lines and symbols. "This represents the dimensional boundaries of your house," he explained. "The last stone must be placed in the replica house itself, directly opposite the breach point in Lisa's wall." I felt my blood run cold. "Someone has to go back in?" Dr. Bennett nodded grimly. "And quickly. As the stones activate, the passageway will begin to close. Whoever goes must return before it seals completely." "I'll go," I said immediately. "John, no," Mom protested. "I have to," I insisted. "I'm the one who opened it in the first place." Lisa stepped forward. "Then I'm coming with you." I shook my head. "You heard what the entity said. You're most compatible. It wants you specifically. It's too dangerous." Dr. Bennett placed a hand on my shoulder. "John's right. He should go alone." He handed me the final stone, a small piece of black rock carved with intricate symbols. "Place this directly opposite Lisa's wall, then return immediately. Don't linger, no matter what you see or hear." Dad, or the entity controlling him, began to laugh, the sound echoing unnaturally through the house. "You don't even know how to find the passage anymore," he taunted. "I sealed it." "Maybe," I said, pocketing the stone. "But you've been spending every night whispering to it. I think you've been keeping it open from this side." The entity's laughter stopped abruptly. Dr. Bennett began a low chant as he moved around the house, activating each stone by touching it with a small silver tool. The stones began to glow with a faint blue light. "Go now," he instructed me. "When all 5 stones are placed, I'll complete the ritual here. You'll have approximately 5 minutes to return before the passage seals permanently." I gave Mom a quick hug. "I'll be back soon." She caught my arm. "Be careful." Lisa hugged me next, whispering, "Don't listen to anything it says." I nodded and headed upstairs to Lisa's room. The barricade of furniture had been cleared away during Dad's earlier rampage. The wall he'd so meticulously repaired looked completely normal. No sign of the hole we'd discovered. I placed my hand on the wall where the opening had been. It felt cold, much colder than a wall should be. I pressed harder, and to my horror, my hand began to sink into the seemingly solid surface. The drywall rippled like water, allowing my hand to pass through. Taking a deep breath, I pushed forward, stepping fully into the wall. For a moment, I was surrounded by absolute darkness and crushing pressure. Then I stumbled forward into Lisa's replica bedroom. The replica house had changed dramatically. The ambient light had dimmed to almost nothing, casting everything in deep shadow. The temperature had plummeted, far colder than during our previous visits. My breath came out in thick white clouds. Most disturbing was the white powder. It covered every surface now, not just arranged in symbols, but forming a continuous layer like fresh snow. Each footstep I took disturbed it, sending clouds of it swirling around my ankles. I moved quickly toward the wall opposite where I'd entered. This would be where I needed to place the stone. "I knew you would return." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, making the white powder vibrate with each word. I spun around, trying to locate its source. A figure stood in the bedroom doorway. Tall, too tall, with limbs that seemed too long for its body. It wore clothes similar to Dad's, but they hung wrong on its body. Its face was the most disturbing part. It looked almost like Dad, but the proportions were slightly off, like someone working from an incomplete memory. "Chambers," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. The figure tilted its head at that unnatural angle I'd seen Dad do. Once. Now I'm becoming something else, as are you. I clutched the stone in my pocket. I'm just here to finish what I started. By closing the door? The figure took a step forward, its movements fluid yet wrong. Why do that when you could stay? There's so much to learn here. Despite my fear, curiosity stirred inside me. What is this place really? Not just a replica of our house. The figure spread its arms. White powder fell from its sleeves in cascading waves. A perfect reflection. A place built from pure mathematical concept, outside normal space-time. It moved closer. I succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, creating a true parallel dimension. But I didn't anticipate the isolation. I backed up, keeping distance between us. So you're trying to escape by taking over my dad. I'm trying to live again, it corrected. 80 years, frozen at 11:43. Do you know what that's like? To watch through windows as the world continues without you? For a moment, I felt sorry for it. Then I remembered what this entity had done to Dad, how it had tried to drag Lisa through the wall. You can't have my family, I said firmly, reaching into my pocket for the stone. The figure moved with impossible speed, suddenly inches from my face. I don't need your permission. White powder swirled around us, forming a cyclone that obscured everything beyond a few feet. I felt a crushing pressure in my chest, like the air was being squeezed from my lungs. You feel it, don't you? The entity whispered. The transition beginning. Stay too long in a place you don't belong, and you become part of it, just as I did. I pulled out the stone, its blue glow cutting through the swirling powder. That's not going to happen. The entity recoiled from the stone's light. Stop! You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, I said, moving toward the wall. You're what happens when someone remains too long in a place they don't belong. A warning, not a template. I pressed the stone against the wall. It sank into the surface like it was being absorbed, the blue glow spreading in veins across the wall. The entity screamed, the sound vibrating through the white powder with such force that it created patterns in the air, the same symbols we'd seen throughout the house. You're making a mistake, it hissed, its body becoming less solid, more like a collection of white powder roughly shaped like a person. I can give you knowledge beyond anything you've imagined. Physics, mathematics, the true nature of reality. I thought of Lisa's face when Dad had grabbed her, the terror in Mom's eyes as she watched her husband transform into something inhuman. Not worth the cost, I said. The blue light from the stone spread faster, racing along the walls, ceiling, and floor. The entity began to disintegrate, chunks of its powder body falling away. You can't escape what you've learned, it said, its voice fading. Once you've seen beyond the veil, you're forever changed. I turned away from the dissolving entity and ran for the passage back to our world. The replica house shuddered around me, walls rippling like water. The white powder rose in a blinding storm, obscuring everything. I reached the spot where I'd entered and placed my hand against the wall. It resisted at first, solid under my touch. I started to panic. Come on, I muttered, pushing harder. Slowly, my hand sank into the wall. I pushed my arm in up to the elbow, then my shoulder, fighting against increasing resistance. It felt like trying to move through setting concrete. With a final desperate lunge, I threw myself forward. For a moment, that crushing darkness surrounded me again. Then I tumbled onto Lisa's bedroom floor, gasping for breath. Behind me, the wall solidified completely, a faint blue glow briefly outlining where the passage had been before fading to normal. I lay on the floor, catching my breath. Small particles of white powder clung to my clothes, but they weren't moving or forming patterns anymore. They looked like ordinary dust. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, and Mom, Lisa, and Dr. Bennett rushed into the room. John! Mom knelt beside me, checking me over with frantic hands. Are you hurt? I shook my head, still trying to catch my breath. I'm okay. Did it work? Dr. Bennett approached the wall, running his hand over its surface. The breach is sealed. The stones have created a permanent barrier between dimensions. And Dad? I asked, dreading the answer. Mom smiled with relief. The entity left him the moment you placed the final stone. He's unconscious, but breathing normally. We went downstairs to find Dad lying on the couch, free from his bindings. The white powder that had surrounded him was gone, and his face looked peaceful in sleep. His eyes, when they occasionally fluttered open, showed normal pupils and irises. Will he remember any of this? Lisa asked Dr. Bennett. Parts, perhaps, he replied. The mind has remarkable defense mechanisms against traumatic experiences. Dad didn't fully wake until morning. When he did, he was confused and weak, but undeniably himself again. He remembered little of his time under the entity's control, just fragments of feeling trapped in his own body, watching helplessly as something else moved his limbs and spoke with his voice. We told him an edited version of events, sparing him the worst details. He accepted our explanation with the wary belief of someone who has experienced something beyond rational explanation. I felt it, he said quietly. Another consciousness pushing mine aside. It was so cold. Within 2 weeks, we put the house up for sale. None of us could continue living there, knowing what existed on the other side of that sealed barrier. Dr. Bennett helped us find a new home in a different state, one with clean dimensional energy, as he called it. Before we moved, he went through the house with special equipment, checking for any remnants of the white powder. He declared the house safe for future residents, though he advised us not to mention our experiences to potential buyers. The breach is sealed permanently, he assured us. Whatever exists in that pocket dimension will remain there, unable to influence our world again. I wanted to believe him. For the most part, I did. Life gradually returned to normal in our new home. Dad recovered his strength and went back to work. Mom stopped jumping at shadows. Lisa eventually stopped checking behind doors before entering rooms. 3 months after the incident, I left for college. The night before I left, I packed the last of my things, ready for this new chapter of my life. As I zipped up my suitcase, something caught my eye. A small glass jar sitting on my desk that hadn't been there before. It contained a small amount of fine white powder. A note sat beside it, written in handwriting that resembled my own, but wasn't quite right. 1143 is always waiting. I never told my family about the jar. I keep it locked in a small box, hidden at the back of my closet at college. Sometimes at night, I think I can hear faint whispering coming from inside. Words in a language I almost understand. Dr. Bennett was right about one thing. Once you've seen beyond the veil, you're forever changed. I now know that between worlds exist reflections of our reality, with their own rules and dangers. And sometimes, if you look too long into these reflections, they look back and remember you and remember